Welcome to Corporate Cafecito,
a Latin and business podcast where we share insights and strategies to help entrepreneurs and professionals thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas.
Y yo soy Carlos Butler. Vale, bienvenidos.
And today we have a special Latina who is an author. It's funny. My uncle was a Marine, and he said one time he was in a bar and there were some Marines there, and he went up to them and he was like, "Hey, jugheads, like, get out of here, blah, blah, blah." And they said, "There's two types of people in this world, those who want to be Marines and those who are Marines." And then he goes, "Well, then there's also a third group, those who used to be Marines." What I love about our guest today and what you'll love about our guest today is that she is invincible and she does things despite being maybe nervous or scared or just she's a go-getter. And she is the author of Sexy Confidence. Que for those of you who are not on our YouTube channel, van a ver que está bien sexy. So bienvenida, Sandra Gonzalez. Welcome.
Bienvenida.
So much. What an honor it is to be here, Nayeli. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. So happy to be here with you both. Thank you, Carlos. It's an honor.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
We're so happy to have you.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So you said the word invincible. Y me quedé así como, oh my goodness, invincible. Because I talk about that a little bit more, or I should say, I allude to that by helping women, be bulletproof. So I'm a retired Marine officer turned executive coach speaker. I had the honor, the distinction of serving 20 years of service as a U.S. Marine. And to be quite honest, what we say is once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yes.
I'm always going to be a Marine for the rest of my life, and understanding that we're here to serve. I now wear another uniform, and so I help women in business rise to top leadership positions in male-dominated industries so they can take command of whom they step into, so they can grab that head seat at the table and say, you know what? This is what needs to happen.
Yeah. This is where I belong. Yes.
This is where I belong. This is where I give direction and influence the masses. So that's what I do as a coach. And yes, as an author, I launched my book last month. And I help them, men and women, specifically women, cultivate sexy confidence, which is a high performance state of mind. It's an attitude that enables leaders to master ourselves so we can stay calm during stressful challenges and situations.
When we were talking the other day, one of the things that you said is when you hear the word sexy, you think about appearance, but this isn't about appearance. And you said that the sexy confidence was something that was inspired by your dad. Tell us a little bit about your dad.
Thank you, Nayeli. Thank you. I love that you point that out, that cultivating sexy confidence is not about the aesthetics. It's not about how we look. It is a little bit, but it's mostly about, what my dad had. My father exuded sexy confidence. Even though my dad maybe had, not even a high school education, when he was 17 years old, he went to the US and he was like, yo quiero algo mejor para mi familia.
Yeah.
And, so he understood that he had strong values, he had strong principles, and he allowed his moral values to guide him. So he was decisive, assertive, super chingon. And I grew up with this male figure who I'm like, man, no tienen miedo a nada. And it was my father who later on, when I was in high school, suggested I join the Marine Corps. And that's another story about another gentleman that I'm willing to share here, who also exuded sexy confidence. And that's where I learned a lot of leadership skills.
Yeah, Sandra, one of the things I think about as I look back at our notes when we were talking is how formative the Marines were to you. You talk a lot about, adversity being your advantage. That obviously is something that feels like it was really crucial to you as part of your, Marine service. And then you've taken several pivots in your life. You talked a little bit about obviously some of the stuff that you're doing today, but it's also really important, and maybe this is the story that you were alluding to, working for the DoD, I believe is where you were at, and working specifically for General Mattis. Was it Mattis, right? Did I get that right? Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, I make sure that I took that on there. Servant leadership was something that was really, really crucial and critical to you as part of this. And it feels like, you were talking a little bit about the fact that part of your book is maybe a little bit of a love letter to that as well. So could you talk a little bit about that experience and how you've been able to kind of make that adversity your advantage?
Absolutely. So I realized that, you know, in order to lead and leadership, I should say, leadership is not a position. Leadership is a choice we make every day by stepping into the best version of ourselves. So this gentleman who was my first boss, he was a colonel at the time, Colonel James N. Mattis. They call him Mad Dog. They call him Chaos. He later became the 26th U.S. Secretary of Defense.
Hmm.
But what this gentleman taught me, what I call he is a lethal weapon. He taught us, and he would often tell the Marines, be professional, be polite, but
Mhm.
have a plan to kill everyone you meet. Now, this
Oh my
is
gosh.
very appropriate for Marines. We're trained war fighters. We put men and women in a hostile environment. Very appropriate.
Yeah.
I think, Carlos, that left an indelible mark in my heart that helped me not only develop my leadership skills in the Marine Corps, but now as an entrepreneur, as as a Latina leader, and so forth, was when he said, "Well, we must first win the hearts and the minds of the people." And
I love that.
he was that perfect example of servant leadership.
Yeah.
So he taught us, Marines aren't just a bunch of brutes. We're taught to use strategic thinking, to think outside the box. How can I win this person over? And that is what helped me in the Marine Corps. How can I connect with these Marines? How can I build trust and rapport? So God forbid if we're placed in that battle zone, in combat, they will follow me when I give them because
A
Marines,
command. Yeah.
when I give them that command, they will execute.
Right.
So I say this because this is applicable to everything in life. I must connect. I must build trust, connection with my daughters. I have two beautiful daughters. I must connect, genuinely connect with those prospects who come to me because I've piqued their interest somehow. So that's my responsibility to build that trust and rapport so we can work together. So this is applicable to everyone. And it just really left an indelible mark in my heart. And I talk about servant leadership in the book, which is, what General Mattis taught me.
That's
And
great.
Yeah. No, I think the military is so important. It's so pivotal and important when you talk about like the lowest ranking, you know, I don't know the titles, but officer or the lowest ranking private, etc. And how the respect that's given to every position and to every, command and understanding, how to build and how to inspire others. When you think about like the military background, you are literally staking your life. You're putting your life on the line for you and the people around you. And so I think it requires a certain, like you said, just this type of leadership to really inspire others and bring others along and also make people feel safe. Um,
And trust too, right? I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things about this is, that I've learned, just even in our conversations is that you have to be able to trust that what you say is going to be done, and that, especially in situations of combat, that obviously, things are going to go as they are designed to go or as they should go. And so trust building is one of the big things that we talk about here at Corporate Cafecito. And I know Nayeli in her work, a lot of what she does from a professional development perspective is around helping, corporate folks sort of develop that trust. And I love what you're saying, because I think that a lot of our people could, particularly we Latinos love our cultural scripts. And so, when we think about things like sexy confidence, that sometimes could feel really sort of uncomfortable. I think servant leadership sounds actually like something that feels more natural to us just culturally. But that trust is so important as you are building some of that sexy confidence. So thank you for pointing that out.
No, I'm gonna just I completely disagree in terms of the servant leadership. I think in our culture, in the Mexican culture where I was raised, it was not servant leadership. It was the children serve the parents serve the grandparents. It's more about like, the especially with gender roles, as the
Good
daughter
point.
and the only daughter, like no, like there are a lot of roles and responsibilities assigned to the firstborn daughter.
Look
And
at you.
so
I love that. That's such a great perspective. Thank you.
I'm like, no, this is not servant leadership in our culture. I think outside of the home, I do feel that that's a spirit of community that we have, right? Where we do want to help
Yes,
others and we want to
exactly.
bring others along. Um, but sometimes in the home, we struggle to live out that principle.
That's such a great point, because you were thinking exactly what I was thinking. It feels more from a community perspective, and that's why I love, Sandra, what you were talking about, because you're not talking about everybody being bulletproof. You're talking about you building that bulletproof, sexy confidence, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. And the onus is on the leader, male or female, to step into the best version of themselves every day and understand, that sexy confidence is about developing our emotional intelligence. It's about, self-care. Because if we don't take our care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to take care of
Right.
people. It comes down to the servant leadership. It comes down to facing our fears. As leaders, we have to be that example sometimes, oftentimes for ourselves and our families, to say, you know what, I'm first generation, but I'm going to be the first author. I'm first generation, but I'm going to serve my country. I know my father wanted to serve our country. He eventually became an American citizen. I'm going to go first. Is it going to be
Love it. What are what's some advice you would give people who want to become better leaders? Or I'm going to position it two ways. How do we get our young Latins who are coming out of college? How do they build that leadership? Or what can they do to be better leaders as they join the workforce? And then for people who are already established in the workforce, what is some advice you would give them in terms of becoming better leaders?
such a great question? And I would say the following thing that comes up for me is applicable to both. So the most important thing we can do, and I talk about it in the book, by the way, is high caliber habits. If you can incorporate high caliber habits, a good example of this is a daily ritual, a morning ritual that, again, I talk about in my book, a bulletproof morning ritual that enables you to prime your brain the right way and your body. Because as leaders, we are responsible for the energy. We are responsible for how we
Yes.
show up. We
Yeah.
are 100% responsible, period. So if you can incorporate these high calibers I talk about in the book, then you have a strong foundation you can build upon to go to the university, to, continue in corporate
Yeah.
America, rising up that corporate ladder to the C-suite. Why not? We need more women, to grab that head seat at that table and take charge. So very applicable to both. It comes down to these high caliber habits.
Hey,
One of the books I
go
always
ahead.
give high school graduates is Make Your Bed First. And it talks about in the military, the first thing you have to do is make your bed. And then you have the first task accomplished. So you build the habit of like, at least I start my day and something's already done.
Yes, I love that, Nayeli. Thank you for suggesting that to them. I was a Marine Corps drill instructor, and the first thing we teach recruits, I trained over 500 women recruits for the rigors of combat.
Bravo.
Wow.
Yes, gracias. So the first thing we teach them is how to make an impeccable bed. And I allude to this story, why it's important in my book, and how it really creates this ripple effect. Once you start incorporating that, then what's the next thing you can move on to? But the importance of developing this morning ritual. Thank you for suggesting that. Such a beautiful, high caliber habit.
I love
One of the things that I think about when I look back at our notes is the fact that you said, and I think this goes to both your journeys from a private citizen to someone in public, someone that joined the military to public service to now being an entrepreneur and a writer. You said our ego is not our amigo. I wrote that
I
down
love
and I
that.
put it in
Yeah.
quotes. How have you taken that thinking and your bulletproof drills to ultimately get you from one shift to another? Because those aren't necessarily easy. I mean, Nayeli's been very open about her own journey, going from corporate to entrepreneurship, but you've gone through multiple iterations of your life. So can you talk a little bit about how you bring that our ego is not your amigo, and that the stuff that you talk about in the book to create those transitions?
Yes, absolutely. Such a phenomenal question. All these questions are great. Thank you. And I think to give like the viewers or listeners a basic premise of what this means, our ego is not our amigo. Um, my father, who I was talking about initially, um, I lost him almost 4 years ago. March 24th is going to be 4 years that I lost my
I'm
father.
sorry.
Thank you, thank you.
What
And I
was his name? Who is this man? Miguel?
Miguel, Miguel Ponce. I love my dad. He's my guardian angel now. May he rest in peace. But at the same time, well, I actually found Miguel unconscious. My mom and I found him unconscious. We did subsequently lose him 2 months later to COVID pneumonia. During that time, I was going through the most difficult divorce. Parecía una telenovela. It's something like that would never end. 3.5 years. That's how long it lasted.
Wow.
So it left me mentally, emotionally, financially depleted. But when I lost my father, it was like a part of me died. Algo murió en mí. And I knew that something needed to shift. And that's where I realized
Yeah.
that for 3.5 years, I had so much animosity towards my ex-husband. Why could it, and now that I lost my dad, I learned my ego is not my amigo. So I was infuriated by rage. I'm going to teach this guy
Yeah.
his life. He's going to get it from me. And so for 3.5 years, estaba ciega because I allowed my ego to manipulate my way forward. But
Yeah.
when my father died, I learned life will humble you. Life will humble you. And I learned there's no losses in life, only lessons. I didn't lose an ex-husband. I was grateful. I learned a valuable lesson about my true strength. I didn't lose a father. I'm grateful I had a dad who gave me the tools I needed in this lifetime. So many people go without a dad, and here I was blessed to have one. So going back to your question, Carlos, our ego's not our amigo. And every day, what can we do? We can focus on the cure, not the disease. When we're
Mm.
faced with challenges, difficult obstacles,
Yeah.
right? See it for what it's worth. It's a challenge. It's not an obstacle. So, it's learning to overcome those challenges with a different perspective and know that, you know what, I have to focus on the cure, not the disease. So I hope this answers your question.
Yes.
Absolutely.
um, how are you and how are you instilling this type of confidence now? If you got this from Miguel, how are you giving it to your daughters?
Thank you. Thank you, Nayeli. So I got pieces of it, big pieces of it for Miguel, my father, may he rest in peace. Um, but I also learned about that our ego's not our amigo. I learned that my mother's, her femininity, which I looked at before, I used to think it was a weakness. And I'm like, no quiero ser como mi mamá. She's so subservient, always waking up at 5 o'clock to make my dad some burritos before he goes to work. I don't want to be like that. I want to be like him. So I say this because when I lost him and I learned to forgive myself and my ex-husband, I realized that my femininity is my superpower, my ability to forgive myself and others, my ability to serve, and my ability to understand when my ego is not being my amigo. So I can remove it and say, how may I be of service?
Mhm.
Who I need to forgive, know when to give myself grace. And all of this is tied to servant leadership because the more we understand ourselves, the
Yeah.
better we can see, right, Nayeli, when someone needs someone, how can I turn that frown upside down?
Oh, I always tell my kids, it takes more muscles to frown than to smile.
Yeah. So go to answer your question, Nayeli, the example we give, it's not what we say.
Mhm.
I've learned it's not what comes out of my mouth with my girls, it's the example I give them.
Yes.
Well, and they have to be so proud of just knowing about what you've done to bring both sides of what you've learned from your father, what you've learned from your mother, the fact that you've worked for multiple administrations, I think at a time right now where it's probably not so clear, or there are a lot of challenges out there right now for public servants. There's a lot of, you know, polarization of these things, your service, your entrepreneurship journey. I mean, like that, I think I have one daughter, I have a 3-year-old daughter. She's 3 going on 21. And yes, I'm sure you know the phases, with having two, but that you're so right. One of the things we talk about is that example, whether it's a daughter or a son, but I think particularly we talk about the challenges that she will face just because of the fact that she was born a girl, right? And so that you are exactly why we immediately jumped at the opportunity to have you here at Corporate Cafecito, and you have not disappointed. So the conversation has been fantastic.
Thank you, God bless.
When you talked about, that it's not about the words, but what you do, that's actually part of why we started Corporate Cafecito. It's because we wanted to show people like, look, she did it and it can be done. Because if I tell you you can do it, you might do it. But if I
Mhm.
tell you, you can do it because you know what? Sandra did it. And this was her story and this was her journey. And you know what? She's on the other side and she's doing great, and I think that sometimes when we see someone like you, right? Just an author, a mother, gorgeous, and just successful Latina, we say, oh man, she must have it so easy. But to understand like what you went through when you were going through your divorce, the feelings around your father, losing your father, and all these things, I think even you said when I was depleted. And for someone to have been depleted and to bounce back is an incredible thing to model to our community.
Well, thank you. May I share a quick story that comes up as
Please. Yeah.
I actually shared this with another woman the other day. Um, and I'll never forget right after I lost my dad, that pain is so profound. And it was the first time I was afraid in my life. Here, a 20-year Marine, and I'm afraid because the one man who loved me unconditionally, who's got my back, is now gone. So I was trying to, after being on the sofa for like a couple weeks, I said, yeah, Sandra, get your butt to the gym, practice what you preach. And
Mhm.
I'll never forget one morning where I was doing squats at the gym and I looked in the mirror and I started to cry. Tanto por el dolor que sentía, por tanto que lo extrañaba. I miss my dad so much. And like, ¿qué voy a hacer? I'm in debt. ¿Cómo me salgo de esta? And I ran to the bathroom and I allowed myself to cry in that moment. And I think I cried so much in that specific moment that when I looked up, I saw my dad's little girl.
Mm.
And I don't know if he sent me this message or Diosito me puso este mensaje en mi corazón. But I realized in that moment, mija, tu responsabilidad es cuidar a mi niña. And I just, that message, it was
Yeah.
so, I'm like, that's my job. I get
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Sunday. So
That is such a fantastic message, as we get ready to to end this show. I think, the responsibility, I think of that in two ways. Obviously, you have the responsibility to take care of yourself. And then one of the things we talk about often in the show is this paying it forward, right? And so always wanting to do better. Nayeli always says that, what, we want to be better descendants. Did I
Than
get that right?
ancestors.
Than
You wanna be
ancestors.
you wanna be a better ancestor than descendant.
Ancestor than you were descendant. See, I knew I was gonna butcher it, but she knows what was in my heart. But listen, we can't wait for people to learn more about your story through your book, Sexy Confidence. And by the way, the title, the cover is gorgeous, as Nayeli
Mhm.
said. If that doesn't fly off the shelves, I don't know what will. So we'll make sure to link this and make it available to folks. But I know that I can personally say that I've had such a wonderful time getting to know you. And I believe that our listeners are going to have such a wonderful time getting to know you as well through our podcast and then subsequently through your book and reading a lot more about what you've done.
thank you so much. And that's what it comes down to, Carlos, Nayeli. Somebody listening at this moment who could benefit from the message, I've done my job. And
Yeah. Yeah, if we could change one life.
That's exactly right. I'll turn it over to you, Nayeli.
Well, Sandra, thank you so much for coming. I love meeting other women, other people who have taken the leap into entrepreneurism and just finding their way. And I applaud you for being an author. And I think I don't think this is the last time you'll be on. I think you'll keep doing things and then we'll have to keep updating everybody. Like, remember Sandra? Like, so we look forward to much success and many more cafecitos with you.
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for joining us and stay tuned next time where we'll continue bringing you stories from our Latin superheroes.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.